So about a year ago, I ended my 4-year-long toxic abusive relationship, and now I am currently in the healthiest relationship I could ever imagine being in. I always knew I was gonna end that relationship, always knew I was gonna be out of it. It was always just a matter of when it was gonna happen. And I will be the first one to tell you that there is never just one thing that can sway you to change your mind or make that jump or get the courage to do that really scary, crazy thing. But if I can be a person to push you in the right direction, then I will try my best to do so. But first, hello beautiful people of the internet. My name is Jaden. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I post a lot of lifestyle content, but I also do post some psychology, self-help, educational type videos as well. So if you're into any of that, be sure to click the subscribe button down below and join our little family here. But before you get too bored and click away, let's get into the actual video. So the first and most important step for getting out of an unhealthy relationship is to identify what's wrong in the first place. There are a couple of people who describe bad relationships in a much better way than I ever could. So I have 2 podcast recommendations if you're struggling to even recognize that you're in the wrong relationship in the first place. The first one is Mel Robbins, which I know she is all the rave right now. There's one episode called 5 Signs of an Incompatible Relationship and 3 Signs You Found the One. I listened to that one last week and it literally changed my life. It was so good, and she just has a way of putting everything honestly in such a brutally honest way, but there's so much care when she talks about it. She really just wants the best for everyone, but she wants to be so honest about the way life is, and that's really what I want to be for you guys as well. Way more painful one, I guess, is the best way to describe it. It's the Call Her Daddy episode with Anna Kendrick, and she talks about her abusive relationship a lot more. So Mel's is more focused on just incompatibility in general, not necessarily toxicity or unhealthiness. Anna goes more into the actual abuse. My experience really was relatable to both. I really found myself resonating with what they were saying in both episodes. So either one of those, if you're listening to it and you're imagining a person or a situation, that's usually not a great sign. But I'm not here to go into all the reasons you might be incompatible with someone and how to notice those signs. Just more so, once you do notice them, how to get out of this situation. More specifically, if the relationship is toxic or even abusive. But if you guys would like me to make a whole video on incompatibility and what makes a bad partner versus what makes a good partner, I can also do that. In tomorrow's video, we'll be talking all about how to have a healthy relationship post many unhealthy relationships. But for today, let's just stay focused. So as I said, one of the first most important things to do is identify what's going on in this relationship. It's also important to identify why we get into them in the first place. So the first reason we usually get into them is experiences in our childhood, different social conditioning growing up, and different attachment styles. A lot of people model their future romantic relationships after either the relationship that their parents had, or the relationship they had with their parents themselves, or even relationships with their friends they had growing up. We as people like to have models to base a lot of our own life off of. So if you grew up around a lot of fighting, a lot of toxicity, a lot of abuse, you're gonna think that is normal, and you're gonna think that is what love looks like. And also for attachment styles, if you don't know what that is, essentially an attachment style is usually the attachment we form to our mothers when we're babies, and that style can either be secure, anxious, avoidant, or disorganized. People with secure attachment styles are very healthy and very secure in themselves. They don't really seek a lot of validation from other people, but they also accept the love that they do receive. Avoidants usually grasp very hard onto any love that they do receive. Avoidants tend to run away from it. And people with disorganized attachment styles are just inconsistent, and they really crave love and then push it away and then crave it and push it away. Like I said, this attachment style can be formed mostly with your mother when you're a baby, but it also changes with different romantic relationships and different relationships in general that you experience as you're growing up. Just like I said with modeling, if you were attached to a person with a specific attachment style for most of your life, you're probably going to continue seeking out those kind of people. The second reason people get into toxic relationships is because of low self-esteem or low self-worth. All it takes is a lack of confidence for someone to really get in your head and make you think that they're the best you've ever had, they're the best you're gonna get. If you don't think you're deserving of love, then you're gonna go for scraps, and you're gonna feel appreciative that you even got that. Another reason we get into these relationships is just the fear of being alone or desperation for a relationship relationship in general, which don't feel bad if you're like this. This is what society programs us to be like. That is the golden standard, is to have like your forever relationship, your forever person. Especially for women, we're hardwired to look for our Prince Charming, want to get married, to want to have the white picket fence. We start feeling kind of rushed as we get older to really have that relationship, and I think people tend to lower their standards as time goes on, especially as women with our biological clocks as well. I know a lot of people get really rushed when we're starting to get into our later 20s. So those are just some of the reasons why it happens in the first place. But once we get to that point to where we're in the relationship and maybe we're kind of starting to realize that this isn't incredibly healthy, why do we still stay? So one reason is we either believe in the potential, which is basically just creating the perfect version of the person you're with in your mind and thinking, well, it would be great if that's where they were, but they're not. But we hold on to that idea. Another reason is like the gender roles and relationship standards that, again, society sets up for us. A lot of people believe that relationships are meant to be hard and that they're very much worth fighting for. And they are to some extent. But again, so many people are modeling very unhealthy relationships and very not worth it relationships that you honestly shouldn't be fighting for at that point. And gender roles, again, makes us as women a lot of times feel like we have to be there to support our man. Another thing is intermittent reinforcement. So this is that whole concept of every time you get really fed up with your partner and you're like, I'm done, this has pissed me off, and they do that whole, I'll change, I'll be better, and they start being better for a little bit of time. They give you some kind of validation or some kind of encouragement that things are gonna improve. So you really get that dopamine hit and you really start believing and you start getting hope again, but then you slowly go downhill again, and then you get the spike, and then you slowly go downhill again, and then you get the spike. Another thing that a lot of people fall into is the sunk cost fallacy. And what this is essentially when you think you've already invested so much time in this thing, you might as well keep going. So say you already dated a person a year, then you already feel like you wasted a year of your life. I already put so much time into this, I might as well just see it through. But then you take another, in my example, 3 years before you're out, and then you wasted 4 instead of 1. Another example is just general gaslighting, manipulation, and trauma bonding. These kind of things can fuck with your head so much that you don't really know if you're the bad guy or if they're the bad guy. When you are being manipulated, you don't trust yourself, you don't trust anything that you think. So anytime I've gone to make a video like this, it's always difficult for me to try and explain stuff like this, because I know that if I watched a video when I was still in that headspace, it wouldn't have really done anything for me, because even though I knew deep down that I was in an unhealthy relationship, I was convinced that I was a crazy person. I was convinced that I was abusive. I was convinced of so many things, honestly. Like, I could not get it out of my head that I was an exception, or that just in general I was doing something wrong. And that's always the hardest thing to explain, because yes, there will sometimes be exceptions, but you're likely not the exception for whatever thing I'm talking about. I know a lot of people who are in this kind of situation tend to go, well, what if I really am the bad guy? You're not. Like, could there possibly be one person watching this who like is the bad guy? Maybe. But like, if you're genuinely getting so caught up in that, you're probably not. One of the biggest things I told myself, and I talked about this a lot in my breakup video before I even recognized everything I had gone through and like what actually happened to me, because I was still in denial about a lot of things, I just kept telling myself it didn't matter because I wasn't happy. Whether or not I was the villain, I wasn't happy. I was not going to be able to keep living the way that I was, and I just wasn't with the right person. Even if I was the worst person in the world to him, I still wasn't with the right person. So I knew regardless I needed to leave. And that's what I hope everyone can get to. You don't have to convince yourself that you're with a villain. You can still tell yourself that everything you're doing is wrong and that you're fucking up everything. But if you're not happy, you are allowed to just leave. So when you are ready to leave, it's important to, as I said, acknowledge all of these different things. Acknowledge the signs and confront the truth. Like I said, you don't have to come to the conclusion that you're being abused or you're being manipulated or that your partner is a bad person or that even that you're not in the right relationship. You can be confused about all of those. But if you're feeling in your heart like this just doesn't feel right and I don't think I can be happy in this, that is the only truth. you need to know. That is the only truth you need to tell yourself to move on. It's also important to build up your self-worth. If you are being manipulated in any kind of way and you have a person in your ear who's telling you that, honestly, whatever it may be, like whatever it is about your appearance, your mentality, your intelligence, different things about your relationships, like, oh, this person doesn't actually like you, or this person is bad for you, anything like that. Whatever they're telling you, at that point, if you know they're just a piece of shit to you, don't listen to a word they fucking say. You know yourself, and it might feel really hard in that moment to know yourself, and it might be hard to trust anyone, even the people who are saying positive things about you, but everything has to come from the inside. It took me the longest time to acknowledge this because my self-worth was really horrible, and it's actually kind of ironic how I realized to love myself, and it's because I was getting really severely bullied on TikTok, and so many people were telling me that I'm ugly which sent me down one of the worst mental health moments of my entire life. And the guy I was dating at the time did not care. He did not give a fuck at all, and he was constantly telling me that it doesn't matter what these people say, like, you have to be tough, you have to be unshakable. And at the time it was incredibly insensitive because I was in one of the worst depressions I've ever been in, and the person who was supposed to love me was showing me absolutely zero support and was not deleting the comments, was not blocking any of these people, and was actually encouraging this behavior, which was horrible. So in his advice of becoming unshakable and very tough, I really didn't learn much about becoming tough and unshakable against the comments, because if I were in his shoes, I would have deleted the comments. I would have blocked the people, which is what I do when I get hate now. But instead, I became unshakable to all the things that he was saying to me. I guess not unshakable, but it did not affect me like it used to. And I would say that was when I really started my like uphill progression, because I just really didn't give a fuck about what he said. The next thing is to talk to trustworthy people and to start therapy. This one's always a tricky one because, as I said, it will be very hard to trust people if you're in a relationship where all of your trust is being taken from you. And there's always roundabout ways to continue to fuel your beliefs that you already have. And one of the things that I did when I was in that relationship was get a therapist that also kind of manipulated me, quite honestly, which I never experienced before. So he worked with prisoners, and he was very much a hard ass. He was very aggressive, and I chose him because I wanted a man as a therapist to explain to me from a man's point of view why someone would treat me like this, like what I was doing wrong to be treated like this, which was dog shit for my mental health. And honestly, I should have chosen someone who I identified more with and who helped me for me, not basically for the person I was with. Yeah, that's a hard one because you need to pick a therapist who is not gonna continuously make you feel like shit too. Like, that was one of the hardest things for me because obviously I'm getting all this shit told to me by the person I'm supposed to trust, and then I go to therapy and it's another person I'm supposed to trust, and they're kind of sharing the same beliefs. So it's like, at this point, am I really gonna believe myself over these two people who I'm supposed to trust who are telling me other things about myself? But one person I always had was my mom, and obviously my mom has been there for me since I was born. She was very consistent, very reliable. I knew I could trust her when I was going for reliable opinions about me. Yes, difficult at times because she's my mom, so of course she loves me. Like, and I did have a lot of people in my life at that point who saw the worst in me. So I don't know what kind of situation that people who are watching are in, but that was the hardest thing for me, was to build up that support system, because everyone who I had in my support system already was not supporting me. But if you feel like you don't really have the support of the people around you, let me tell you that if you're seeking out content like this, you know for a fact that this is not the right thing for you. And it doesn't fucking matter what anyone else says, because you know in your heart you wouldn't be looking for a video like this if you didn't want to get out. So if you've gotten to that point, the most important thing is to properly plan out an escape route. For a very long time, I also couldn't get out because I did not have the money to provide for myself. Every time I would want to leave my ex, I would check my bank account and see like $200. And I knew that if I wanted to get my own place, that was not gonna cut it. So I waited until I had a couple $1,000s and then got this place, which brings me to just rip off the band-aid and leave when it's safe. For me, I at least knew I wasn't going to be unsafe if I left. Physically, nothing would ever happen to me, but I still needed an escape route because it was hard to stay committed to the action plan that I had. So I really made sure that my apartment was set for me before I took all the action to actually get out of there, because I needed something to hold me accountable. For every single person, I know it's different, but for me, the second I was out of the shared living space with him and I was actually in this apartment by myself, I knew I was fully out, and I knew that there was no chance I would ever go back to him, I would ever talk to him again. And I know a lot of people do have that experience, but also a lot of people don't. If you want to not go back, I think one of the biggest things that you can do for yourself is just to keep a list of all the reasons you shouldn't. Keep the pictures, keep the videos, keep the notes. I know for me, I had so many pictures and videos of me sobbing. I had notes of me talking about how much I wanted to die, how much I wanted to leave him. And it really hits when you go back and you watch those videos and you read those different notes and you put yourself back in that situation. You think about how much you don't want to feel like that anymore, and even though you may still be sad, it will feel nothing like the pain of being in the relationship. Also, it's really important to go no contact. I know that this isn't 100% realistic for everyone. Some people have kids, some people are married. Just logistically, there's some things that you sometimes have to figure out. My advice is to keep it as formal as possible. I still had a few things after my breakup where it was either like logistics about house because we had lived together, or like mail subscriptions, like stuff like that we hadn't fully fleshed out like the day we broke up. So yeah, we had to have like a couple interactions after. What I just did was keep it as formal as possible. Basically take out the romantic relationship you had and just basically be like, this is like a lawyer. That's almost how I thought about it. Try not to think of anything more of the conversation. Do not encourage anything past what you have to talk about. And the last thing is to focus on healing and self-care and doing all of the things that make you you. Especially if there were certain things that you either weren't allowed to do in the relationship or were crucified for in any way, or just didn't really have the time for it. This is the perfect time to do them now. You have the freedom. You're your own person. You're probably in your own space. For the first few months after ending my relationship, journaling and just documenting in general. I filmed a lot of videos. I worked a lot on myself. I started doing my nails. I made my apartment what I wanted it to be. That was a big one because the living space that I had shared with him was probably one of the worst aspects of that relationship. It was not me at all. I did not feel like I was home. So I made it a point to make this apartment my home. Started nurturing new relationships, started talking to more people who actually thought I was a good person. And I promise you, if the relationship was unhealthy, you're gonna rediscover so many things about yourself and you will become yourself again one day. I know in the moment leaving will seem very, very hard, and it might seem hard for a long time even after you actually do it, but rather than know you're gonna have a lifetime of unhappiness with someone who just isn't right for you, whether it be because they're abusive or toxic, or if they just aren't right for you in general and don't make you happy, or would you rather have a chance at living a happier life, whether it be by yourself or with someone who will be much better for you? That's all I have for this video. If you did enjoy it, be sure to leave a like and a comment, and if you're feeling generous, you can even subscribe. I do hope to see you guys all in the next video, but if not, bye bye.